Hello, today we're going to talk about new media theories. I am Professor Rachel Khan of the UP Journalism Department. When we say new media theories, we are talking about media theories commonly used for journalism studies. These are agenda setting, priming, framing, and gatekeeping. The key players of these theories, or the key theorists of these theories, are David Weaver, Max McCombs, and Donald Shaw. First one is the agenda setting theory. This centers on the ability of the mass media to signal to the public what is important. Agenda setting is the media's ability to transfer salient issues through the news agenda. This way, the public agenda can form an understanding of the salient issues. Pag sinabing salient issues, ito yung mga dapat na malaman ng tao o yung mga issue na nakakaapekto sa mga buhay nila o nating lahat. There are two basic assumptions. The press and the media do not reflect reality, they filter and shape it. And media concentration on a few issues and subjects leads the public to perceive those issues as more important than other issues. For example, during the time of elections, then we can expect that the newspaper is filled with news about COMELEC, about the candidates, and about election itself. So when we're talking about the agenda setting theory, we are actually talking about media not telling us what to think, but what to think about. There are three types of agenda setting. First, the public agenda, when the public determines the agenda for which stories are considered important. So, for example, when people clamor to find out about the candidates or about their stand in particular issues, or when they clamor to know what's happening in a certain locale that has been affected by a typhoon. So, this is what we say, or what we call the public agenda. The media agenda or media agenda setting is when the media is the one that determines the agenda for which stories are considered important. Sometimes the public does not know what's going on. For example, some time ago, there was the issue about the corruption regarding this Farmally company. Of course, if media did not play it up or give it attention, then the public would not know that there are issues of corruption with regards to the COVID related health protocols or health materials. And lastly, the policy agenda, when both the public and media agendas influence the decision of public policy makers. So, if there is enough clamor regarding a particular issue, perhaps the legislators will listen and change their policy direction. This, for example, happened when the legislation decided to only give 1 peso as the budget of the Commission on Human Rights. So there was a public clamor that this cannot be because it is an independent constitutional body. And also it's the one that looks after the human rights of its citizens. And after that, Congress relented and gave it a proper budget. But without that clamor of both media and the public, perhaps you will have a very embattled and underutilized Commission on Human Rights. Agenda setting is seen in the choice of stories, for example, on the front page. What the newspaper chooses to highlight as headlines is a form of media agenda setting, telling you what to them, to the editors, is the most important and what you should be thinking about. So yung headline nung mga dyaryo o yung headline ng isang TV news program, ang gusto ng editors na ma-highlight o mapag-isipan ng mga tao, ito sa kanila ang pinaka-importanting malaman natin lahat. Ito yung sinasabi ko kaninang balita tungkol sa Human Rights Commission. At minsan naman may mga isyong hindi talaga napapansin katulad ng climate change. At minsan naman, ang mga balita ay medyo mababaw dahil binabalita pa ba ang last 2 episodes ng isang K-drama. Sometimes when we think of agenda setting, we think that it's all bad, but actually it is not. We have to recognize that a newspaper has limited space, a news telecast also has limited time, and therefore priorities have to be set about what to report. And this is why, even in journalism studies, we have what we call news media values. Ang mga news media values ang mga criteria na nagbibigay sa atin ng ano ba dapat ang nasa balita. Ito ay timeliness, ibig sabihin dapat nangyayari ngayon, dapat malaman natin ngayon. Significance or importance, yung nakakaapekto sa karamihan. Prominence, yung mga kilala o tungkol sa mga importanteng mga personalidad, institusyon, or lugar. Proximity, yung malapit sa atin, whether geographically or psychologically. Oddity, yung hindi karaniwan, something unusual. And lastly, consequence. Ibig sabihin nito, sinasabi sa atin ng periodista kung ano ang dapat nating malaman. And news of consequence means that the journalist judges something as important even if it has not yet hit the headlines or does not appear to be that significant. But it could be building up into something that we ought to know. Ngayon, ang agenda setting ay nasa mali kung ang base niya ay mga media bias or mga bias ng sources of news. Katulad ng spin, ito yung mga prinopromote ng mga public relations tungkol sa isang tao o institusyon. Unsubstantiated facts, minsan ito ay fake news. Opinion versus fact. Slanted news, yung may punto na agenda ng isang tao. Omissions, yung mga hindi nababalita na dapat ibalita. And flawed logic, yung mga hindi naman dapat magkasama o magkatugma, pero pinipilit na pagsamahin. The second theory is priming theory. Priming enables the audience to evaluate the situation and to conclude how effective the media have been in order to make a decision by providing a frame of reference. Media creates an influence among people to make judgment or a decision. So, pag sinabing priming theory, ang ibig sabihin dito that the repetition of an image or an ad or a message embeds in our minds para yun kagad yung naiisip natin. For example, when we see double golden arches, we think of burger. In other words, when we say priming or priming the audience, we are influencing them to think in a specific way or to look at an issue in a specific manner. How is this done? Step 1. The information is received through media channels, whether social media influencer, sa balita, sa dyaryo. Pangalawa, it shows us how they want us to think and influences our decision. The assumption here is that the human mind take a decision based on the preconceptions that are already stored in our memory. So, trinitrigger ng priming ang ating mga biases and they influence the audience to act and think in a specific manner. For example, during elections, sa mga polls, medyo naiimpluwensyahan kung sino ang ating bobotohin, no? Dahil ayaw natin ng talo. So baka kumampi tayo dun sa mga mataas sa polls. Ang problema dito, hindi lahat ng poll scientific. Minsan ay very biased yung poll mismo, pero nakaka-impluwensya pa rin sa pag-iisip ng tao. So, this is the problem with this information. It gives us data that influences our decision, but it is data that is false, and therefore we are being manipulated. Advertising is very good at priming. Katulad ng mga produktong nagsasabing, mas maganda ka kung mas maputi ka. Diba? So, if they're promoting white skin, we think now that beauty is equivalent to having fair or a fair complexion. Kahit na hindi naman ito totoo. Priming effects depends on at least 4 boundary conditions. First, recency or bago siya. 2, repetition of exposure to a prime. Ibig sabihin, uulit-ulitin hanggat sa nasa memory na natin. Third, applicability, meaning something that is applicable to the audience. And fourth, subjective relevance of this prime. Kumbaga, na-target ka na audience at madali itong paniwalaan. Now, let's go to framing theory. This refers to how the media packages and presents information to the public. Media focuses attention on certain events and then places them within a field of meaning. Kaya nga sinasabing framing, isipin mo ang picture frame. Nandun sa loob nung frame, yung painting o yung picture mo. Or framing, yung kasya lang dun sa lens ng camera. Media highlights certain events and then places them within a particular context to encourage or discourage certain interpretations. In this way, the media exercises a selective influence over how people view reality. So pag tinignan natin ang theoretical diagram nito, makita natin na may frame building, tapos may frame setting. So minsan, pumapasok rin dito ang agenda setting. So framing in the newsroom is influenced by internal factors such as editorial policies and the news values, kung tama naman yung kanilang approach, and external factors. Minsan, tama rin yung approach dahil ang external factor could be limitation of space, limitation of airtime, pero minsan may external factors rin na mali, kung katulad ng impluensya ng mga media owners. Then there's frames in the news. This is the issue-specific frame, or it could be a generic frame regarding a particular person or issue. And finally, the effects, or the framing effects. The information processing, how it is presented based on the frame chosen. So for example, mas mabenta ang frozen yogurt na sinabing 80% fat-free kesa yung yogurt na sasabihin mong 20% fat. Pero 'di ba, pag-isipin mo, pareho lang sila. This is an example of Fox News, which is an American news outlet, but they also have a network in South America. So you see the Fox News Latino, which was aired in Mexican TV, has a different approach to the same news as Fox News Channel, which is aired in the United States. So given the same situation in 2 separate incidents, Newsweek, an American news magazine, treat the news differently. So, for example, in the first cover, we see murder in the air. That's when a commercial plane was accidentally hit by a Chinese missile because the commercial plane entered into Chinese airspace by accident. The same thing happened to a commercial plane that entered American airspace. And when it was accidentally hit by an American missile, the Newsweek headline was much more tame. Minsan nakikita natin ang impluwensya ng editorial sa pinipili nilang headline. For example, ang isang pro-government headline hindi binabalita ang malaking issue tungkol sa corruption. So, like agenda setting, framing is not all bad. Framing stimulates the decision-making process by highlighting particular aspects and by eliminating the others. The newspaper frames the news within a particular viewpoint. This can help readers process the news or change their perception of an issue. So, like I said before, if the basis of the framing are news values, then it is something good. But when the framing is based on other things, then it can lead to bias or even false information. The following concepts are associated with framing. First, journalist selects the topics that will be presented and decide how they will be presented. This determines the issues audiences think about and how they think about them. Second, audiences interpret information through their own frames. Audiences' frames may overlap or contradict the media frames. Third, frames are reinforced every time they are evoked, whether positively or negatively. And fourth, frame building is a systematic process that occurs over time. For example, Black Lives Matter, war on drugs, whether you view the Marcos presidency as a dictatorship or not. So, depende ito sa paulit-ulit ng paggamit ng frame at kung ano ang pinakikinggan ng audience. This is how these four theories are related, or the theoretical relationship between agenda setting, gatekeeping, priming, and framing. We can see that they overlap, and sometimes when you do a study about the news media, you will have to use more than one of the theories at a time to make sense of a particular news phenomenon. This is how we can see the relationship of framing and priming. When priming is high, then a frame can, when priming is high, then framing can be used to further highlight a particular issue and the way people should think about it. When priming is low, then language can be used to help push the frame. Framing can also be used long term to maintain a particular priming effect on the audience. Lastly, the gatekeeping theory. Sa pangalan na lang, makikita natin kung ano ang epekto nitong particular na teorya na ito. No? Mag-isip ng isang gate. Pag nakasara ang gate, hindi ka makakapasok. Gatekeeping is the process of selecting and then filtering items of media that can be consumed within the time or space that an individual happens to have. This particular theory is developed by Pamela Shoemaker, Tim Voss, and David Manning. This means gatekeeping falls into a role of surveillance and monitoring data. The gatekeeper, whether the editor or the journalist or the producer, decides what information should move past them through the information gate to the public and what information should not. For example, editors decide what kind of news items will be published and what should not. Every day, the editors of the newspapers or the producers of a certain newscast meet in what they call a story conference and decide which news goes into the front page, which news becomes headline, alin dito ang nasa back page, at alin dito ang hindi ibabalita. Let's look at this excerpt from the movie The Paper. This is how editors sit around in one meeting every afternoon to discuss the news for the next day.
2 days after a black kid is killed in a neighboring community, two white businessmen named what are the names? Hanson and McGregor get shot up with racial epithets written on their car. Now, in response, the New York Sun decides to run a parking story.
Keely called me at 7 this morning.
Yeah, I bet he did.
Joe, will you please cover your mouth?
Metro. I assume we're all over the subway.
3 pieces. A tick-tock, list of injured, search for heroes, standard transportation rank stuff.
We got any art?
Yeah, I already picked up some nice spaghetti shots on this one.
Love the severed arm shot.
What about the motorman? They find him yet?
Yeah, they found him drunk in a skunk in his neighborhood bar.
Feature.
We got Allison's profile of a teenage hitman. We got Grace, finally done with that Hollywood who's banging who chart. And part 3 in our continuing...